Hi guys, welcome to episode 16 of the Fiberista Files. Today is Tuesday, November 30th, 2010. Last time I podcasted, I talked about the doing business as, the tax identification number, all of those things. All those things that help you, especially if you get them done in the beginning, so that when you do shows and become a bigger business later on, you've got all those things done. Today I get to talk about a little bit more fun stuff, and that is really, okay, you want to sell fiber and yarn, but where do you get the stuff? Where do you get the stuff that you're going to sell? Primarily undyed fiber and undyed yarn. Those things are obviously things that you need. When I started researching what I was going to sell and how I was going to sell it and where I was going to get it, I ran into a couple of issues. The first issue was I didn't know who the fiber wholesalers were. I didn't know the names of the companies where, the bigger hand dyers, indie dyers, were getting their fibers. It was quite a process for me to gain the trust of other sellers enough for them to divulge where they got their sources. The second issue I ran into when I wanted to sell was that of the wholesalers that I had heard of, their initial orders, like to become a seller of this wholesaler's fibers, you have to have an initial order of sometimes up to $500. I did not have $500 with which to start my business. Where can I get smaller quantities of fibers and yarns that are undyed and dye them up to sell them, to make more money, to get more, and so on and so forth? It did take me several months in order to get my first wholesale account. I have compiled a list of places that you can go and resources that may help you. As far as fiber is concerned, fiber and yarn, the actual stuff to dye. Knit Picks, obviously a pretty well-known option. But they sell lace weight, they sell several different kinds each of lace weight, fingering weight, worsted, bulky, all that stuff. And they do now have fiber as well. Merino, some other ones. I don't know how much undyed they have, but I know they do have it. And you get free shipping over $50. So definitely, that was what I started with. My sock yarn was their, the sock yarn that they use for their stroll, I think it's called. The 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. They come in 462-yard hanks for you to dye up. It costs more than it costs with a regular wholesale. I think the undyed sock yarn that I was using was $6.29 a skein. So you figure you've got to at least double your money, and that's already putting you at 12. And if for growth you're going to, you have to work out pricing, and I'll talk about that another time. But it is a little bit expensive. My wholesaler right now costs me about $3 and change per 425 yards of sock yarn. So it's a little bit more yardage, but almost double the money. But again, it's cheaper than you can buy sock yarn retail, dyed up. So definitely that's an option. The fiber that I started selling came from the Sheepshed Studio. And I'm going to link all of these in the show notes. They should all be down under here by the time you see this. The Sheepshed Studio is a husband and wife team, and they sell the stuff that the Brown Sheep Yarn Company doesn't use. If you're in Canada, there's a place called Acme Fibers that has yarns and fibers for sale. Paradise Fibers, which is on the west coast of the U.S., they have fiber and yarn, and they also have per pound discounts, so the more you buy, the cheaper it is. So if you do have a little bit of money and you want to get, 10 pounds versus a pound, you actually save money per pound, which is pretty cool. Etsy, obviously, there's a lot of people who sell fiber undyed and undyed yarns on Etsy. They generally make a couple bucks per 4 ounces or whatever. Some of them are producers, people who have their own sheep or alpaca or whatever, and they sell the fleece or the roving or whatever. You really can do well. Do your research, look around, compare rates, and see. So that's the yarn and fiber. Once you have yarn and fiber, you need to dye it, which is absolutely the most fun that you can have in the whole fiber industry. Dyeing stuff, making it pretty colors is the best fun, I think. There are all kinds of different dyes, and they do different things. you need to know whether you need dyes for protein fibers. These are the animal fibers, wool, silk, any other protein. Nylon is in this category. Nylon is obviously not a wool, but it responds to the fiber dye, the acid dyes, the protein dyes. Bamboo, cotton, hemp, all of those fibers are plant matter, plant fibers, and they won't dye with the same dyes. Acid dyes and direct dyes, or protein and plant dyes, are two different kinds, and depending on what you are dyeing, you're going to need different dyes. If you plan on doing both, you're going to need 2 sets of dyes. There are union dyes, and a union dye is a dye that will do both, like RIT dyes that you can buy in the supermarket. RIT dyes are union dyes. They do both protein fibers and plant fibers. The problem is, if you're not dyeing something that has both in the same braid, you're going to be wasting dye, because there's going to be dye that's not absorbed, and you're going to have to worry about putting that into your septic system or your public water supply, that sort of thing. So definitely think about that. There are all kinds of different dye companies. There are different dyes that do different things. Do your research. Find out what fits you price-wise, what fits you for the things that you're going to be dyeing, the types of colors. Are you a blender? Do you like to blend oranges and reds and see what you come up with? Do you like to, do you want to have a bunch of colors so that you don't have to do all that? Are you going to be using the same color a lot? Can you get bulk quantities? All of these are things that you need to do. I'm going to hopefully link all these in the show notes, but there are Jacquard, Cushing, Pro-Chem, Procyon, Earth Hues, Country Classics. You can always use what you see a lot of people doing on Ravelry. They use Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid will dye protein fibers. I already talked about RIT dye. That will do it. There are a bunch. Do your research. Ask around. See what people have and what they use. Try them. One of the things you should check, though, is what else do you need for the dye to stick on the fiber? Because, for example, Cushing, you have to have vinegar or citric acid in order for the dye to set on the fiber. I have used 3 different dye companies, and I actually use, depending on the color that I want, I use a combination of different dye companies. I may use some from one dye company to get this particular red, and use the blue from over here because this blue is brighter. 3 or 4 different dye companies. And also look to where they come from. There's one called Gay Wool Dyes, and they're lovely, but Gay Wool Dyes come from Australia, so they're much more expensive because you have to pay to ship them to the US. So there's a lot out there. Think about it. Test it out. Get color cards. It costs you $10 to get a color card, so you can see, what does this red really look like? What does this yellow look like? How does this compare to the color card of another one? Which one do I really want? Can I even get that? Or does my water, like I have city water, and my colors tend to more towards orange than pink, like any reds, yellows, pinks, they all are kind of very orangey, versus somebody who, like in the Midwest, may not be able to get a red at all. It may not just not work for them. They may come up brown. Your individual water supply does matter. If you have really horrible water, you may be forced to dye using bottled water or distilled water, which would be also very expensive. So think about all that stuff. Research it. The only other thing I can say is there are a couple of tools you're going to need before you begin. When you make your dye order, when you make your fiber order, get a couple of things. The first thing you need to get is a scale. This is just a digital scale. It's very, very simple. It does ounces and grams. It does to the gram or the 1/8 of an ounce. In order to be accurate, it comes with this little dish. So the fiber, and I've got, of course, a whole bunch here. This is something that I actually just split up. This is just a little strand of superwash merino, and it will all sit right inside this bucket, so I don't have to worry that I'm not as accurate as I could be. Just sits right in there. Definitely you are going to need a scale. You will need this in order to sell an accurate amount. People get really upset if you say 4 ounces, then it's only 3 7/8. The other thing that you definitely need are some measuring spoons that go down to at least 1/8 of a teaspoon. If you can get a 1/16 of a teaspoon, all the better. And some kind of squirt bottles. You can use other squirt bottles. They have them all over. You can look, just do a Google search on squirt bottles and you'll find a ton. Get some that are good size. You want at least 12 ounces, maybe as many as 32 ounces, depending on how much fiber you're planning on dyeing and how much dye the fiber requires, you know, to set. Those tools you're definitely going to need. Next week, I'm going to talk about other tools that you need, when you need them, and sort of a ballpark on how much they cost and what those tools do for you. There are definitely some tools that make your job easier, faster, more efficient, and more fun. So until next week, guys, happy spinning and knitting, and I'll see you next Monday.